Good morning, everybody. This is Jeanette, and I want to welcome you to our Sage 300 Financial Statement Designer class. So, customizing financial statements. In the GoToWebinar panel or part of the email that you received from OnPoint, there are two handouts. One is the PowerPoint that we're going to be looking at this morning. The other is a PDF file with the training material that we're going to actually cover. So if you have a chance to print that out, that would be good before we get started so that you have something to take notes on. Plus you'll have screenshots available to you after the class that you can follow along once you get into your own software and start modifying your own designs. All right, so material either in the GoToWebinar panel or as part of the email that you received with the invitation. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to talk about a few areas within the FS Design program. We're going to review the features that are available inside this program. We're going to look at what data is used when you actually run the financial statement. We're going to look at the parts or the components of a financial statement design. We'll do another little overview again of how it all fits together. And then we'll look at design options. So we're going to look at a couple screens in this PowerPoint first to cover those areas. And then we're going to jump into the software and I'm going to demonstrate the FS application for you. All right, so this is on page 1 in the handout. Talking about the features. So this design program is an application that comes bundled with General Ledger. So if you have GL on your system, you have the FS program automatically. This application is going to let you quickly create default designs. It'll generate a balance sheet, a trial balance, an income statement, and a comparative statement based on your chart of accounts. So you need to have GL up with all your accounts generated before you go into the FS program to create those default designs. And then once you have those designs created, you can easily go in and modify those standard designs or create new ones, totally brand new ones, or you can copy those standard designs to new names and go in and modify those. So you just have a variety of ways to either modify or create multiple financial statement designs that meet your company needs. We have a piece within the program that will allow you to streamline printing. And what we're talking about there is the option to create print groups or statement groups that you can have multiple designs reside inside that group, and when you run the group, it runs multiple statements together in the order that you have them entered into that particular group. And I'm going to show you how to do that a little bit later this morning. You'll be in control of what is being presented and how it's arranged, meaning you're going to be able to control the order that the accounts print in, which accounts actually print on the statement. If you need to, you can design your own calculations, or FS calls them expressions, whereas Report Writer calls them formulas. Within Financial Statement Designer, we do have the option to create these calculations or expressions. We can also, if you have multiple entities within your general ledger, we can have designs that are specific to those entities, or you can have designs that can be run on any entity within your company. So you do have some flexibility there as far as which designs are being used and how they're being used, and which entity within your data folder is using those entities, or excuse me, those financial statement designs. Okay. The file that provides all of the dollar amounts to your report or your financial statement design is the GL master file. That's the only file that provides dollar amounts, balance information, budgets, the account format that it will list out your accounts in. If you have prefixes created, we'll be looking at prefix groups. It'll also can provide partner information if you have partners within your company and you want to provide statements based on that. Again, big note here, the only transaction or data file that provides information to the financial statement design is the master file in General Ledger, so master.glm. No transactions, no other information from any other application can be brought into this financial statement design, strictly the GL master file. The parts to the design, you have the design itself, which we're going to be taking a look at here in just a few minutes. So this is where you have formatted for how the statement is going to print, the content and what it's going to look like. The designs themselves have a .fsd extension on the end. So if you're looking in your data folder and you want to know what the FSD files are, any name that has a .fsd on the end. Statement groups. So these are the ones I talked about a few minutes ago, where you can group statement designs together and print them all out all at once, one right after the other. The statement group itself has a .fsn as the extension. Prefixes, if your General Ledger uses prefixes, even if it's just one, you have to create a prefix group for that. And those prefix groups are stored in the file named prefixes.fsp. And then accumulators, these are where all of your expressions or your formulas are stored. That's in a file called accum.fsa. The system will automatically generate a net income accumulator when you first go in and create your default files. Excuse me, this is the file that will add up all of your income accounts and subtract out all of your cost and expense accounts. Okay, the anatomy or the parts to the statement design itself. We're going to be dealing with a header, the body of the design, and possibly a footer. And within these areas, especially in the body, we'll be dealing potentially with text information. We'll have to set up columns going across the page so that the system knows where to pull the values from. And then we'll have amount lines going down the page where it's listing out the account numbers, descriptions, and then the values for each of those columns that we defined going across the page. So current activity, current balance, future balance, anything that we set up in a column will print out on an amount line. And then we have totals. We have to define our subtotals if we need them, or grand totals at the bottom of the statement. We can define page breaks. So if we want to put page breaks in at certain points, we can, or we can let the system do the page breaking for us. We can also insert blank lines. So if we need to put some space between sections on the statement, we can. And then images. We can pull, like up in the header area, we could pull a company logo into that area of the design. So these are the parts. We're going to be talking about most of these today once we get into the software. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and jump us into FS is the application name or financial statement designer. All right, so this is on page 2 in your handout. What I'm going to do first, though, is I'm going to use File Create. This is how you're going to create the standard or default designs and the default accumulator within the software. So if you want to make a note at the bottom of page 2 that you want to use File Create as your first step. And when you do this, I'm just going to say override it, yes. When you do this, it actually goes out and it builds the 4 default statements and the accumulator based on your chart of accounts. So however you have your income accounts, your cost and expense accounts, your assets and liabilities, however you have them marked, it's looking at these designs and it's pulling in the account numbers in each area based on that setup. So you want to be sure that you've got your account numbers marked correctly. And then from this point on, you want to make sure that any new accounts that you add into your chart of accounts, you need to make sure that you come in here and make sure that those that account number is included in the design. Otherwise, after you add that account and post to it and run your financial statements, your financial statement will be out of balance. And I'm going to give you a tip here as we start looking at these on how to potentially keep that from happening. All right, so it's opened up a window for us here for each of the different types. So you have a compare ACCR. This is the comparative statement. You get a trial balance. The TBAL ACCR is a trial balance design. The balance sheet, BAL SACCR, is your balance sheet design. And then this one is the income statement. And I'm going to leave this one up since it matches what's in your handout on page 2. All right, so the first thing that I want to point out is the different types of lines that we're looking at here on this window. This first line right here, this gray line right here, this is just a blank line. I click down into the next line and you see here a set of field names going across the page, and you see that each of these fields has a box around it. Right? This is what's called a column line. Now, that's how you can tell. You can tell by the display here what type of line you're looking at as to how it's displayed on the screen. So the column lines will have a box around the column heading, whereas the next line down, this is a text line. It's just black. So we've just manually typed in on this line the word income and told it to underline. Okay. So any lines in your financial statement where the whole thing is black, that's a text line. If the line is green, this is an amount line. This is the line that's used to print the account numbers within your master file when you actually print the financial statement out. Okay, and then the blue lines are your total lines. So when you click on a blue line, it's actually telling you up above what's being added into it. And we'll get to that as we go through each of these line types. So again, looking at the design, the columns going across the page are on a line where you see the account or the field title with a box around it. So this is the column. This is text, black. This is an amount line, green. Total line, blue. All right, so we're going to start with the column line first. If you go to page 3 in your handout, to get into the options for that line, you simply highlight the line, and then if you double click on it, it opens up the options window, which is at the top of page 3 on a column line. So on this window, it's giving us information about the field that we double-clicked on. So I double-clicked up here on account. You see the solid black line around that field name. That's how you can tell what field you're looking at, is that the line goes from a thin gray line to a solid black line. So on this first column, I can see the field. I chose account, the heading. It pulled the default heading from the software. I can change that or blank it out if I don't want a heading in that column. Down below in the boxes, I have I've defined how this heading and the columns are going to print. So the heading, I have it left. The heading has an alignment, left, center, or right. I can tell it to draw a line underneath that heading name. I can control the font. I can control the column itself, the alignment, center, left, right. I can control the font. Now the rest of this is grayed out because of the type of line this is. I can't control, or the field, I can't control the column type or any symbols. If I move over, I should be able to control that in one of the dollar amount columns. So let me use the arrows at the bottom. So I can move over. You see that I moved over here to the title. And I've got the same values here, the heading, the column, alignment, and fonts that I can control. If I go one more over into the current activity, right? So this is pulling the current activity field, again, from the GL master file. I can control the heading, the column, and then here's where the column type, because it's a dollar amount, I can control whether it's dollars or a percent or a ratio or units. I can tell it how to handle the symbols. I want the dollar sign to print on the first line in the group and then at the total line. Or I can tell it no symbols or every line or the first line only. So however you want your dollar signs or pound signs, whatever symbols you have printing within the design, you can control where they print, how they print. And then down below, this is where you're telling it where to start. This is the position on the page where it's going to start printing. So this is indenting 4.25 inches, and it has a width of 1.68. So this is a little bit different than Report Designer, where you're telling it the number of spaces to print. Here, it's doing it with inches instead. And I've got the same values when I go over to the current balance field. So I can see the field that's been pulled. I can see the heading. I can see how the heading and the column are going to be controlled. I can see the type, the symbols, the printing positions. Okay. Right now, this is just pulling straight information off the GL master file. If I want to add more to this, I have some buttons up here at the top where I can add another GL field. So if I click on it, it'll give me the list of fields that I can choose from. But let me point out one more thing. Down at the bottom, you've got arrows here where I can arrow back and forth as to where I want information to be added, or this can control where stuff is going to be added. When you click back and forth, when you're at the end and you want to add a field, it's going to add that field to the right of where you are, where that column is. So let's say I wanted to add future balance to this. I could select future balance and I could click OK. Oh, wait a minute. That was just a change. Let me go back and balance. I'm sorry, I should have used the insert button here. Okay, so if I say insert, then it's going to grab the future balance. And of course, well, this is good practice. I'm going to delete one of those. Okay. Yes. Okay. So because I clicked insert, insert puts the column to the left. Append, whoops, puts it to the right. So if I put this in the wrong place here, I'm going to delete it. And instead of using insert, I'm going to use append. And that puts it to the right of where you are. Okay. So again, if you're adding to an existing design, just be careful of where you are up here, and then use the buttons that down below to either insert or append the field into this column line. And again, remember, insert goes to the left, append goes to the right. And then again, we can delete, just highlight the column that you want to delete and use the delete button. Now let me append again, and let me show you also here on this insert column line, column screen. It defaults to show you the balance fields in the GL master file, meaning the account, the title, the current balance, year ending balance. I can scroll down and see future activity fields, current period activity fields, year end activity out to 12 months ago, okay, or multiple year activity buckets. Okay. All right. So you just scroll up and down until you find the field. Now, if the field needs to come from your budgets, if you've entered budgets into General Ledger, click on the budget fields. This will show you all the budget fields. If you need cash flow fields, this shows you all the debit fields that are stored in the GL master file. If you need to pick month fields, click on the monthly fields. This is picking the months in your current fiscal year. And then we also have forecast fields that you can use. The comparative statement, just as an FYI, uses these monthly fields to come up with the correct activity for the month that you're in your fiscal year. Now, the other thing that you have here is you can get to the expression from here. So expression, again, being your calculation. So the expression field screen is at the top of page 4 in your handout. If you click on expression either here or back here on the window behind it, it brings up the screen where it's asking you for a name. You have to give it a name, and then it wants the expression itself or the formula. So here, what you can do are represented by the buttons down here at the bottom. Right, so you're going to pull a field typically. So just double click on the field that you want, and it adds it into the expression window. And then down below, you're going to use the buttons for add, subtract, multiply, divide. Okay, so I clicked on the multiply, and it put the little X in here. And then I can do a value. I just typed that in. Or I can I can change my field. So you see here, field type, it defaults to balance fields. I can get to the budgets, I can get to the cash flow or the monthly, or I can get to the accumulators. So if I've set up accumulators and I want to multiply or divide or add, excuse me, those together, I can put that in this expression. If you need to, this kind of follows the math rules, if you need to have part of this calculated first, put brackets around it. Put your cursor here in the beginning and use the bracket like this, and then maybe you do a minus. We're subtracting something else. Maybe, I don't know. Okay, so whatever the formula is that you need to calculate, that's what you're going to put up here in this window. Now, if you're pulling budget fields, that opens up these fields over here on the right-hand side. You need to make sure that you pick the right budget type, and then if there's a year offset, you need to, if it's not the current year, it's a previous year, you need to tell it how many years to go backwards. And then if this is going to be totaled, if this is a totaling field down here in the calculation, tell it how you want that down total. Do you want it to calculate and then add to the total at the bottom? Or do you want it to add down and then calculate? So this is important to remember. You might want to circle that in your handout if you're having a problem with the down totals in a section on your statement, and the problem is in an expression column. This is the first thing to come in and look at. You might need to change it to the other option and see if that corrects the total at the bottom. All right, so fields then going across here. We can grab fields from the GeoMaster file as far as balance fields, budget fields, cash flow fields, or the calculated monthly fields. We can do expressions, so we can set up a calculation for that particular column. The other thing we can do is if you need a horizontal total going across the page. Maybe you've set this up to where you've got different divisions printing across the page, and you want a total, horizontal total on the end. So here, this brings up the screen where you can add the columns together, add or subtract the columns that you want included in that total going across the page. So as an example here, I'm going to come back, and I've got current activity. So maybe I've got a couple of prefix groups out here. I'm going to just append here, and I can say done, and then I can come over here, whoop, and I can say append, and I'm going to do a horizontal total. So I can say I want these two to add together. So I can put a plus here and a plus here. And then I can give it a title. Oops. Okay. So I'm adding these two columns behind here, current balance and current balance, into a total. And that's kind of a skimpy example, but when we get a little farther into the class, I'm going to show you how you can define entities going across the page, and then that would be the example where you would add those together to get a grand total. So I'm just trying to show you here that you can add values going across the page using the total button. So I'm going to actually delete that. And I'll delete that one too. So we're back to our original design. Okay. All right. So those are the options that you have for setting up, again, the columns going across the page. All right. Text lines are very simple. You're just typing. Just click into a blank line and type. Right? So those are text lines. The green lines, these are the amount options. This is on page 6. So I've highlighted this green line here under income, and I'm going to double click to open it up. And you can see here, this is where I start telling it what to print in this section. I want you to print from account 4001 to 4181. This is the range that it picked from my GL master file, from the chart of accounts. It picked up, it saw this was the first income account, this was the last income account. Now, in order to kind of help you out with future new accounts, what I would suggest you do is on these lines is that you increase the range so that if you add any new accounts in between these two accounts, you don't have to come in here and modify the line. You can increase your range to include numbers that don't exist yet. All right, so make this range in the income area big. We're going to do the same thing in cost of sales and expenses and other income as we go down this statement. All right, down here where it says itemize, summarize, I want to itemize each account, meaning I want a line for each GL account number to print that's within this range. If I just want a summary, I can click the summarize on one line. If I'm summarizing on one line, I need to put in a title. I can also tell it to indent, which I don't need to do. I want it to print starting in that first position. And then this print test, do not print when 0. The default when you set these up is to always print. So if you've got account numbers in there with no activity or no balance, you're going to get a line for each of those. So you might want to think about changing this to be do not print when 0, so you're not wasting paper. There may be some cases where you need to change the sign on an account or a series of accounts. That's what this reverse sign means. It means it's going to print a debit with a credit symbol. So there'll be cases for that, and within your chart of accounts, you'll know if that's the case. You'll need to put that account or accounts into a separate amount instruction line so that you can reverse the sign on them. All right, the buttons on the side, you have a list, so you can list your account numbers. You have a delete range, so if you've got a range in here where you added some stuff in here and you did it by mistake and you need to get rid of it, this is how you delete. You highlight that line and then click the delete range button. There's not any other delete button on the screen for that. Okay. Save. If you make any changes on this screen, click the save button to get out. Click close. We're going to come back to cell overrides when I bring up the balance sheet, but this is another way that you can control, again, what or how stuff is printing on the statement. Okay, for now, we're not going to do a cell override. We want the title, the account number, the title, the activity, and the balance to print with no overrides or changes. All right, so I'm going to save because I made a change here, and then I'm going to close. I'm going to come down to cost of sales. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to change this so that all my 5,000 numbers are in that range. I'm going to save and close. For my expenses, I'm going to change this to be 6,000 to 6,999. I use the 6,000 range of account numbers for expense accounts. Save that and close. And then on the other income, I don't have anything right now in my chart of accounts that's marked as other income, so it's just defaulted to a non-existent account number. If you've got stuff in the 8,000 range or the 7,000 range, you'll need to put that range in here. I'm going to go ahead and save this statement, and then I'm going to close this, and I'm going to bring up the balance sheet so we can talk about cell overrides, which is on page 7 in your handout. All right, so this looks very similar as far as the line types and the colors that we saw in the income statement. So up at the top, we have a column line where we're telling it what what fields to print going across the page. So we're pulling the account, and then we're pulling the title, and then we're pulling current balance. Okay. So the green, again, column text. That's what this is. The black, and then green shows me my current assets. And again, I would come in here and make some modifications to increase this in case you add more account numbers. Do the same with your long-term assets, same thing. Do the same with your liability accounts, same thing. Okay, now when we get down to the equity section, you'll notice that this net income line right here looks a little bit different than the other green lines. This has a dotted box around the dollar figure. And that's telling you that this particular field here in the statement, they've used a cell override because we need to add in the net income. And that we don't have an actual account number in the GL master file called net income, right? So we don't have a way for us to pull in the current balance for that into this section. So what we do here is we tell it, we're going to do a cell override on this line. And again, you can tell that there's a cell override again on this window because there's little X's around the word cell overrides. So when you click that button, it shows you starting with the columns going across the page. So column 1 is the account number. We don't have a cell override in there. This is grayed out. Column 2, the title. We do not have a cell override here. It's grayed out for the title. But for current balance, we do have an override here. We've checked the box to override the column field. And instead of the current balance, we want to change the field here. And by changing, we're going to say, okay, we don't want anything in balance or budget or cash flow or monthly fields, but we've got an accumulator out here called net income. I want that to be used instead. So we're overriding it just for this one line for net income. And this accumulator, I'm going to show you here in a little bit, is set up to add up all of the income accounts minus all of the expense and cost accounts to come up with your net income for that, for whatever time frame you run the statement. All right, so now, let me close this. You can do cell overrides pretty much wherever you need them. This is a simple example here on a balance sheet where where we need to pull in a formula or a calculation for that net income line. There may be other examples in your company where you need to pull certain types of accounts or certain ranges and do some type of a calculation for a field within the design. You have access with that cell override. Again, you can pull any of these fields to override the current balance field that defines that column, and you can also create multiple expressions as well. So it doesn't have to be a field-to-field correspondence here. You can do one field to another, or again, like I said, an expression can handle it also. So it just depends on how complicated your statement needs to be as to how much you might use the cell override. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of here. And now we need to talk about the totals, the blue lines. All right, so we've covered the columns going across. We've covered the text. We've covered the amount lines, including the cell override. So now we need to talk about the totaling that you need to have happen in your statement, whether you're doing subtotals in a section or grand totals at the end. Again, the total lines are blue. Now, on an existing blue line, when you click on it, it shows you what's being added into that line. So up here, I've got the pluses. So I can tell that this total current assets line is adding up all the accounts that are in that section. And the same with the long-term assets. I can tell that what's being added into this section is just the totals for the accounts in this section. When I get down to total assets and I click on it, now I can see that it's down totaling the current assets with the long-term assets. And that's giving me total assets. And it's doing the same thing down in the liabilities and equity section. It's adding up, and then it's grand totaling. And then down here, I'm getting the total of the equity section here, and then the total of the long-term liabilities, total liabilities with total equity. Okay. Now the way this works when you're adding, and actually, I think this is a good place for us to show how to insert. So we've talked about on an existing design, what the colors mean, but how do you add those into a design? So I'm going to go ahead and close this. Let me actually save. And I'm going to create a new statement design. All right. So I just did File, New, and that brings me up into a blank statement. Here under Design, Insert, this is where all of your options are to set up a brand new design. So the first thing that you want to do when you're creating a new design is you want to define the columns going across the page. So here I can say I want the account number, I want the title, and actually this is building across, and I want the current balance. Actually, maybe I'll just go ahead and grab activity and balance. So you see here, this is how I'm building that going across the page. So then once I have the fields in that I want, I can click Done. Now I can double click on these and I can start, changing my options if I need to. All right. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to add the amounts. And actually, what I usually do, this black line right here underneath the gray area, that is the end of my design. I like to move that down. So what I usually do is I will start putting blanks in here to give myself space. So I might do a couple of blanks in here so that moves that line down. And then I might put some text in here. I'll say that this is our FS class design. Okay. And I'm going to come down on the next line down, and I might say, here's where I want to insert the amounts. So what do I want? What account numbers do I want to print? So here I might say, again, 4,000 to 4,999. Okay. And I can do another range in there if I want. I can go ahead then and save this. You see that it starts building the green lines for those amount lines. Okay. And then let's say right here, I want to get a total. So here I go again back to design. I say insert, and down here at the bottom, I see total. Now, notice it pulled the dollar amount, the dollars in, and it's blue. But notice my cursor has changed to like a crosshair right here, and it's added another section up here up at the top, where I can see the plus and the minus and a close. So right now, it's wanting to know, it's defaulted to plus. It wants to know, what are we adding in here? So I'm going to click on this green line, and you see it changed it to pluses. It's going to add into this total line right here. If that's all I need, I'm going to click the close button, and that closes that instruction. Now, if I want to put a description to this, I need to double-click on that line, and that brings up the screen that's at the top of page 8. And so here I can give it a title. I can indent the title if I want to, and maybe I want it to come over or maybe 2 inches. I can give it a different font. So maybe I want this to be bold. I'm going to underline it. It defaults to single. I can tell it to underline after. Maybe I want that to be double. And then the total font itself and the column offset. This part right up here is controlling this part of the line, the total line itself, the descriptive part. For the dollar amounts, I need to talk about this down here. So if I want the totals to be offset, meaning I don't want them directly underneath the dollar amounts from the account numbers, I can move them off. That's what the balance sheet does. It moves the total off to the side. I can do that if I want. I can also change the dollar amount font if I want to bold it like that. And then I can say OK. And that brings in the total line along with its print options. So again, you can do these inserts in a brand new design, or if you're working with one of these or an existing design, you can insert these types of instructions throughout. They're not just reserved for a brand new design. You can do these inserts in an existing design as well. All right, let's talk about now, we're in the body. Let's change our view. Up here at the top, you have the option to change your view up to the header. And this is where the text field options come in on page 9. So let's say we want our company name. So on this first line here, and actually, again, I'm going to add some blanks in here so I have room to work with. And on this top line, I'm going to say I want it to insert a text field here. And this brings up the screen at the top of page 9. And I want our company name to come in. And then maybe down below that, I'm going to add another text field. And I might say, and actually, I'm not going to pull a field there. I'm going to type something, and I'm going to say that this is a test design for class. down below that, I might say, give me another text field, and I want to say maybe either for the number of months ended, or I might say, I might have prefix groups in here, so I might want the prefix group description. So if you've got multiple entities in your company and you're using the same design for each of those entities, and you're having to handwrite the name of the entity on your, whenever you print the statement, this is an easy fix. Come in here and up in the heading, put your somewhere in here, put your prefix group description in there, so that you then see the name of that division, or the name of that grouping. Okay. Now, right now, all of this is printing far over, over here on the left. If I want to center this, we have some options we can do here. Highlight the line and go to Design, and then go to Design Options. Oops, sorry, Instruction Options. So here you have an option to center this on the page. If you say OK to that, it moves it over and centers. So I can go ahead and go to Design Instruction Option and center all three of these. Okay, that will make it look a little bit better. And then I'm going to go ahead and save this. Whoop. Not quite yet. Let me change my view back to the body. Okay. Let me go ahead and save this. We'll call this class. And then from here, I can test this. If I do a print statement, I can go ahead and pull this in. Just do a little bit of a test here. Okay. Okay, so I can start to see what my statement's going to look like. So you don't have to go out into GL to do a test print. You can print it right from inside. Okay, and all I did was go to File, Print, Statement, and it gives you the same options as if you were in General Ledger. All right. Let me close this. Okay, we're back. So we're back here. So again, you have the option here of adding or even modifying. So let's say that something happened to this and it's not adding in correctly, or I missed a section, or I meant to do a subtract instead of an add. If you highlight the total line that's incorrect, you can come back up here to the top and go, instead of inserting, you can go to Assign Total. And that will give you the same options here, the plus, the minus, and the close. And you can change this. Simply highlight the line that needs to be changed, and then change the math. And that changes it from an add to a subtract. So again, highlight it, change the math symbol up here, and then re-click on that line again. And then when you're done, click Close. All right, let's talk about, we're going to come back to some of the other options here in a minute as far as some design options are concerned. I want to talk next about some of the optional things that you have that you can do inside here. So I want to talk first about statement groups. This is at the bottom of page 9. If you go into Tools, statement groups are the second one down on the drop-down. And this is where you can create new statement groups. So I'm going to say maybe this is a monthly month group. Okay. So give it the statement group name, and then you have to click on Options, and it'll say, yes, I want to create, and we'll say monthly statements. Okay. And then here's what you're going to use to take the statements, the existing statements that are out there, and put them into a group that you're going to run. So I might do a balance sheet, I'll add it over here. I might do an income statement and add it over here. So I might have designs that are named, I have different ones that I run each month versus the ones that I run at the end of a quarter or the end of a year. So you're just adding the design over into the group area in the order that you want them to print. Right? Once you have them in, you just click Close. Right? Now, either in General Ledger, or I could run the statement inside FS. I could run the group. Under Reports, under Financial Statements, as soon as you create one statement group, when you come in to print the statement, it defaults to show you the statement groups that are out there. You can still run the individual ones. Just click on Individual Statement, and you'll see them all. Otherwise, if you're running a group, highlight the group, and then it's going to show you in order. I picked the balance sheet first, and then I picked the income statement. So it's going to print them back to back in the order that I put them in. So I'm not having to come in here and run each one at a time. I'm going to run the group instead. So this can save you some time as far as the printing of the statements is concerned. All right. The next one is Prefix Groups, and this is at the bottom of page 10. If you have prefixes in your General Ledger, you have to create at least one prefix group so that you can run the statement, because the software doesn't know how many groups you have and which ones you want to print at certain times if you have more than one. Okay. So I've created a couple of prefix groups here. I'm going to create a new one here so we can look at the options. I'll just call this class. We'll call it class prefixes. Okay. Your options here are to create a custom prefix group, and this is where you click on Enter Prefixes and you tell it what needs to go in here, what prefixes go in this group. And you can use your list button to select. Okay, and then you just okay that. Now I've got one here where it's a single statement consolidating all, and I've got two, which is a separate statement for each company. I'm going to create 10, and we'll do this as a custom. Oops. 10. Because this is the sample data, I'm going to create 21. Let's do a separate statement for each prefix. 21. Okay. So now, when I run the statement, let's do an income statement here. Here's where I can see my prefixes, and it forces me to pick one. I can't run the statement without picking one of these one of these prefix groups. Now, if you have, let's say, go back to FS, let's say you've got a couple of companies and you want to be able to run them without having to select a prefix. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up my income statement, and I'm going to save as for company number 10. Okay. And then within this new design, I'm going to come in under Design, and I'm going to pick Entity Comparison. And this is actually at the bottom of page 11. I'm going to turn this statement into an entity comparison, and what that does is on these dollar amount lines, it opens up this field right here called Prefix Group. And I can come in here and put the prefix group in that I want to use for the dollar amounts on this statement. So now when I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go ahead and print it. I'll just print it from here. And I'm going to pick this one. It does not ask me for a prefix group anymore. It knows. It knows that it's prefix group 10 and that it's for company 10. So the other thing I'm going to do here then is I'm going to copy this one, do a save as, and I'll make this one 21. And I'm going to come in here and change this to 21 and change this to 21. And I'm actually here, let me view the header here. And I'm going to put in here, so that I can demonstrate this to you, I'm going to put the prefix group. Where are you? Where are you? Quarter, period ending, quarter, fiscal year ending. Oh. Well, I'm just going to say this is prefix 21. Let me center it on the page. Save it. Close this. Close this. Let me open up 10. I'm going to go into the header. I'm going to say that this is prefix 10. Center that. Save that. Close. And let's get even more fancy. I'm going to make a group. I'm going to say that I want to call this okay. Come on. Yes. And I'm going to put in here, let me find them. I want that one, and I want that one. Okay. All right. So now let's come over here to reports, financial statements. I'm going to grab the entity ones. When I click OK, notice it did not ask me for a prefix group. When I do the print preview, here's prefix 10, so company number 10. company number 21. So this is a good way, again, where you can create prefix groups for specific entities that you want to have a special design for. You can make those designs entity comparisons, lock in the prefix, and then you can create a group that prints all of those statements together. And again, it doesn't stop and ask you on each one what's the prefix group, and you don't have to print them one at a time. You can use that statement group over and over and over again. And again, the way I did that was I came in, after I created the prefix group, I came in on that statement and I went into Design, Entity Comparison. And then within the column lines, on the dollar amount fields, I locked the prefix group in. And this is on page 11 and the top of page 12 in your handout. All right, the accumulators, this is at the top of page 11. Under Tools, Accumulators, this is where we're adding and subtracting income and cost and expense accounts. Now, the default, again, it goes out based on your chart of accounts, and it creates this accumulator by default and sets it up in the default balance sheet statement. I would come in here and I would make this the large range, okay? So that if anything else gets added in here, and you could actually go all the way here and just say, put that all on one line, and then come down to this line, and you see where it says delete range, I could delete that out. And so now everything between 4,000, and I might even change that to a 4,000 to 4,999 gets pulled in, and then anything between 5,000 and 6,999 gets subtracted. So now I don't have to worry if I add any new account numbers into the GL master file. I don't have to worry about coming in here and making that change. It just automatically is there. And it's the same as long as you also come in here and make these ranges large enough too, so that you, again, these ranges should actually match what you have in your accumulator as far as the income statement is concerned. And then you won't have to worry about coming in and making any changes. Now back under the accumulators, if you have different divisions or different types or ranges of accounts that you need to accumulate for expressions, you can create as many accumulators as you need. There's no limit here. So you can add and subtract things together as needed. The fields also, you can change the fields that you're adding and subtracting. This defaults to current balance. You can hit the list button and you've got the same set of fields that you have when you set up the column instruction. So you've got balance sheet, budget, cash, and monthly fields. If you're using a budget field, you need to put in the type and then the offset, okay? Meaning if you're going into a previous year, you need to put how many years back. All right. Now, lastly, there are three places that we need to take a look at for modifying the overall statement, and these screens are on pages 12 and 13 of your handout. The first one is the design options. So this is under design options, and this is where you can change the description of that shows up when you're running the statements, when you're picking the statement design that you want to use. You can change the date, how it's going to, the format that it's going to print in. You can change the orientation. It defaults to portrait. You can change that to landscape. You can tell it to repeat column headings when it goes to a new page or not. Undo the check. The font section, you can put in how you want the header and the footer to be printed, what the starting page number it needs to be. On the Amount tab, this is at the top of page 13, you can control whether it's a fixed symbol or a floating symbol. You can select which symbols are used for money, for percents or ratios. You can control the decimal places for all three of those, whether or not to print commas, how to print abnormal. So this is set defaults to brackets around the amount. You can change that to a minus if you want. Okay. And then lastly, you have rounding. Okay, so this design defaults to round to the nearest dollar by default. If you don't want it to round, change that to no rounding. And then if you are rounding, how do you want the totals to be handled? Do you want to round each line? That includes the total, or do you want to add and then round as far as the total line is concerned, or do you want to round and carry the rounded? So again, it depends on how you want to see the down total in that section or at the end of the statement. So if it's not coming out correctly, this is one place to check to see if you're rounding, if you are rounding, if that method is right. If you're not rounding, then there's some other problem if the total is not coming down correctly. And then how do you want the zeros? You want to truncate zeros or not? Okay. Okay, that brings us, I think, pretty close here to the end here. So let me get back to my All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here today. Just some tips and reminders, and then we'll open it up for questions if you guys have any. So first reminder that your amounts are coming from the GL master file only. We have no access to new, current, or history or any other application. So GL master. Use entity comparisons. So if you're constantly having to select a prefix when you print, and you only have one or two, or actually I guess it doesn't matter how many you have, you can create separate statements for each of those entities and then use the entity comparison option. Lock the entity in on the individual statements. That will eliminate you having to pick the entity each time you run it. Also, as another tip that's not on here, put all of those statement designs in a group. So when you run the group, it gives you all the statements. You don't have to run them individually. Okay. Reminder, your budget fields. You can pull those in for comparisons, variances. You can pull the budgets into an expression. So you have access to all of those budget amounts and fields within Financial Statement Designer. And then lastly, don't forget the header and the footer. You have, other than the body, you have sections above and below that you can put information into. One more tip about the header. Again, if you are using prefixes and you want the name of that entity to print at the top of each page, so you're not having to write it down or trying to figure out who the statement belongs to, lock in the prefix name or prefix description as part of your header. And then again, take advantage of those prefix groups and entity comparisons. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our session today. And so I'd like to open it up for any questions. If you want to type your questions into the chat area in the GoTo webinar section, Tina can read me the questions back, and I'll try to answer those for you right now. If you think of questions later, you can always email Tina, and she'll forward those on to me, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So, Tina, are there any questions out there yet?
Not seeing any yet. Not yet.
Okay. I know the financial statement designer can be a little bit intimidating at first when you go in and start working with it, but it really is. Once you get comfortable with it, it's kind of fun. Excuse me. And once you do a few of them, make a few modifications or create a new one, you'll see how it's actually pretty simple. The complicated part will be the expressions, maybe some of the cell overrides, depending on what you need for your company.
I'm still not seeing any questions yet.
Okay.
So still not seeing any questions yet.
I think we'll let everybody go. If you guys think of anything later, please email Tina and she'll forward that on to me. And I'm glad you were able to join us today, and I hope to see you in a future session. Thanks.